Hey guys, I wanted to try covering multiple topics quickly in a single video to better accommodate your low intelligence, low attention span personality. Let's get started. In November of 1775, the Marine Corps was formed by the Continental Congress based on the tradition of the British Royal Marines. At the time, sailors in the Navy were recruited informally, oftentimes through impressment, a far cry from the professionalism that modern navies operate with. A sailor's labor was used to run the functional seafaring tasks of the ship, while the Royal Marines, which is just the romantic word for sailors, were soldiers who were stationed on ships to serve as the combatants, operating the cannons and firearms, enforcing the will of the captain and defending against mutineers, along with boardings and shore parties. There were historically two kinds of Marine Corps actions. Navy stuff, such as the Battle of Derna, where a contingent of Marines led a force of Arab mercenaries into battle. Or Army auxiliary stuff, such as the 6th Marine Regiment, which was an Army regiment during the First World War that was formed around Marines taken off of their ships. This aspect of Marines as an extension of the Navy was massively expanded in the Second World War, where the Marines were used for a series of amphibious operations against the Japanese in the Pacific. Many of the most famous battles of the Corps were fought over desolate islands, where the Marines took appalling casualties against well-entrenched defenders as part of some vague strategic goal established by the United States Navy. What's most impressive about battles like Iwo Jima or Peleliu is that they didn't even need to be fought in order to secure the islands for the United States, since the defenders would have just starved. But the Marines actually made it take longer to secure the islands, since they had to bring their own food and water, which the Japanese would pilfer to extend their own supplies. After the Second World War, the Department of Defense was formed and sought to make the Marine Corps into a special operations force for amphibious operations. But this was sabotaged by the Navy, who didn't want to lose their budget for the Marines, creating the bloated Second Army we have today. The Marines are organized eerily similarly to the Waffen SS, with the nominal role as honor guard for the Führer. The shitty second-hand equipment and off-brand camouflage patterns. Most importantly, there is the emphasis on recruiting white supremacists and foreigners. Speaking of the Waffen SS, let's quickly summarize the facts. The Waffen SS was formed from a nucleus of SS paramilitary groups in 1940, essentially to conscript manpower that would otherwise be unavailable to the Wehrmacht from men who were registered in the Nazi Party but had jobs that excluded them from conscription. This is made obvious by the fact that the divisions were originally named after the groups that their manpower was drawn from, such as concentration camp guards, labor unions, Hitler's Youth, and the Orpo. At no point were the Waffen SS considered to be an elite fighting force. They were generally worse equipped than the Army, which didn't want to divert their limited resources, so they made for a convenient nucleus for Steel Division battle groups that allow the Nazis to have a more diverse unit roster than multiple Allied nations. In 1943, the Waffen SS was expanded to its maximum size by introducing the conscription of Volksdeutsche, ethnic Germans from outside of Germany. These men wouldn't have been registered to the replacement army because they lived outside of the 21 military districts established by the Nazis to register conscripts. But the SS would perform a census on territory they occupied to establish the race of the local population for exploitation and extermination. So they already knew who was nominally German in an area. The narrative about the Waffen SS being an elite or dedicated Nazi force served the misinformation of both the victor and the defeated. Since the Soviet Union committed genocide against ethnic Germans in Eastern Europe, while allying themselves with the Nazis in East Germany, it was easier to make up the clean Wehrmacht myth, since those East Germans were mostly Wehrmacht veterans who committed the same atrocities. Plus, would you rather say you were fighting against a bunch of teenagers or against Hitler's personal bodyguard? In the case of the 17th SS, to be fair, it's likely the Hitler's Youth Division fought with Teutonic fury to protect the sanctity of their assholes from the hordes of British pedophiles. Let's shift to talking about oil, since that was something the Nazis never had enough of. Up until the 20th century, vegetable oils were used for paints, lubricants, and fuels, thanks to their ability to be processed into a stable liquid form similar to whale oil. Where animal fats and butter were used for cooking thanks to the fact they couldn't be used industrially due to solidifying at room temperature. The economics of cooking oil changed with industrialization. Modern vegetable oil started as a way to extract extra value out of other products, starting with cottonseed, which was a waste product from cultivating cotton that could be pressed for oil and then used as animal feed. This was followed up with other animal feeds like rapeseed, sunflowers, peanuts, soybeans, etc., which would all be pressed for oil and then sold as meal for animals. Economically, this made it impossible for animal fats to compete. The animals would have to take the diminished energy content of the seed meal, then convert it with major energy loss into their body mass, with a small portion of that body mass being fat. It also turns out that consuming animal fat is associated with cardiovascular disease since it contains saturated fats and cholesterol not found in vegetable fats, which makes it even less appealing. There are also major cultural issues with certain animal fats which makes vegetable oil more appealing as a broadly marketable product. Because of the economics of the situation, plant-based cooking oils dominate the market now. About 98% of cooking oil is plant-based, with another 1.5% being butter and the remainder being split between different animal fats. As a result, animal fat is sold for about 20 cents a gallon to recyclers who refine it into diesel fuel. Basically, they're letting the recyclers dispose of the oil they can't make any money on, where a gallon of cooking oil can be sold for 50 times that amount. If only there were suckers who would buy a more expensive and less healthy cooking oil, which is where disinformation can be weaponized to convince stupid people to spend more money on crappy cooking oil. The 3 claims I have been able to squeeze out of the animal fatards is first, vegetable oil is 1 molecule away from plastic, which is because all fats are hydrocarbons, including your own body fat. Chains of hydrogen and carbon atoms arranged in certain ways that living organisms can make use of. In fact, crude oil was formed by geological conditions on dead microorganisms of algae and phytoplankton, which were mostly composed of fat. The second one is that vegetable oils cause colon cancer. Fat including vegetable oil doesn't even reach your colon. Your small intestine breaks down lipids and stores it as body fat. The reason people are getting colon cancer is because they're eating more meat than ever. They're constipated because they don't eat enough fiber since they won't eat beans, fruit, or whole grains, so they have shit fermenting in their colon causing all sorts of damage. In fact, the average person who isn't a vegetarian is eating significantly more animal fat than any generation before them since they're eating more meat in general. A McDonald's beef patty is 20% fat, and most people are eating meat like that 3 times a day. Finally, hexane is used to process vegetable oil as a solvent that can separate from seed meal. The thing is that this chemical treatment isn't used for food-grade vegetable oil. It's used to make industrial products like soap and biofuel. The amount of hexane is minuscule even if you were to eat oil processed with it, because the hexane is reusable and a lot more expensive than the cooking oil, so the processor wants to minimize losses. If you are getting hexane in your diet, it's from bioaccumulation from eating meat from animals fed oilseed meal. Thanks for listening. If you disagree with anything I have to say, make sure to argue with me in the comments so I can mock you.